Hari Om friends, and welcome to the fourth part of the series on the Karnataka Empire, popularly known as the Vijayanagara Empire. So in this part we will take a look at the life and times of Ala-ud-din Khilji, uh, who, as you will probably know, is quite infamous, and he single-handedly was able to cause massive havoc and destruction on a lot of powerful and existing Hindu kingdoms throughout India, right, going right down up to Tamil Nadu. But before we have a look at him, let's take a look at what was the situation on the world stage, and especially in the environments around Bharatvarsha in the 13th and 14th centuries. So in the 13th century, for most part, and early 14th century, the descendants of Temujin, he's better known as Genghis Khan, they were tearing a blaze of destruction throughout the Muslim world, which included Central Asia, Afghanistan, Persia, Iraq, and today's Middle East, including China, Southeast Asia, and they carried on right till Europe. Now, what happened as far as India was concerned was this led to a influx of dispossessed Muslim princes and their retinue. So typically each would bring 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 or 5,000, 4,000 trained soldiers with them. So you had this massive influx of mercenaries. So the situation was very similarly to what happened in Syria, if you think about from 2011, where you had this massive influx of jihadis from all across the world. Who poured three, or I think it was 3 to 4 lakh jihadis who poured into Syria, and the country was pretty much destroyed. It's a miracle that the rulers and the country is still surviving in some form of shape. So this happened in India because India became the epicenter of global jihad, particularly as the Mongols were pretty much you know killing every Muslim they could find, especially in Central Asia and going right up to Persia. Anybody who opposed them was gone. Now it's a popular misconception that the Mongols were Muslims. So at a very later stage in the 14th century, their branch, which was in Iran and Middle East, did convert, but the Mongols themselves were followers of Sanatan Dharma, so they were sky worshippers or shamanists. So they held even the Buddhist lamas in very high regard. So so this is another misconception. And the word Khan is actually means a leader of a particular group of soldiers. So it doesn't have any Islamic or Muslim background. So this was just adopted later on, and especially a lot of them converted as well. So this process of Mongols attacking India started from roughly around 1220s, 1240s, and this continued till the early years of the 1300s. And see, the armies they used to bring were quite big, 100,000, 150,000, 50,000. Uh, but it was never a full-scale attack like what they did on the other parts of the world, which was why the Delhi Sultanate was able to use the resources looted from Delhi and the Gangetic Plains and Punjab especially, and then oppose them. So the influx of jihadis also coincides with the ability of the Muslim tyrants at Delhi to raise massive armies with wealth and women looted from the Hindu kingdoms. So like I said, their stranglehold was in Punjab, in the area surrounding Delhi, and parts of today's Uttar Pradesh. And obviously, you had a splinter group which had established itself in Bengal. But Bengal, even in 1300s, till mid 1300s, in Sylhet, what is now in Bangladesh, which was known as Srihatta, had a very powerful Hindu kingdom. So it was not like Bengal had become completely Muslim or Muslim ruled. So the Delhi Sultanate was very patchy even for the first roughly 100 years of its existence. So it was just holding on, and by looting resources from the surrounding Hindu kingdoms. And all of these jihadis were obviously quite eager to go on a jihad against the Hindus. So after the breakthrough against Prithviraj Empire, which was achieved by Muhammad Ghori, for most of the 13th century, the Sultanate had mostly stagnated as it struggled against the Hindu kingdoms, of Rajputana, and you also had the Chalukyas of Gujarat who used to send armies right up to Ajmer to fight them, and then you had the Yadavas of Devgiri. So there's an inscription which talks of the Yadavas fighting the Muslims in Malwa in around 1220, 1230. So you had these, other Indian powers which were even fighting the Sultanate. So it was not just the, Hindu princes of the Gangetic Plains who were opposing them, or just the Rajputs of Rajputana. So there was quite a coordinated effort. Okay, so let's look at Alauddin Khilji's career. Okay, there we go. So comprehensive resource to read on this Asura. So that's the correct name to this. So Rakshasa or Asura is the correct name. Okay. Now he was very brave and very capable. So we have to accept that. Okay. So that is a separate facet of his character. So he had military capability, no doubt about it. Was he brave? Absolutely. Okay. So Professor Kishori Saran Lal's book, or Professor K.S. Lal's book, History of the Khaljis, is a very comprehensive resource on this. And I put a photograph on here. So this is my copy. And uh, I'll just give my comments about this book. It's a fantastic book, but there are some things we need to know. So I'll just briefly run through, the bio of Ala-ud-din Khilji, and then I'll read an extract from the inner flap of the book. Okay, so Alauddin was the son of a chap called Shihabuddin Masood Khilji, who was in turn a brother of Jalaluddin Khilji. Now, Jalaluddin Khilji had grabbed the power in Delhi in 1290 from the last of the Turkish slave sultans. Okay, so these were the descendants of Qutbuddin Aibak. So you had Iltutmish and so on and so forth. So the last person of any consequence was Sultan Muizuddin, and Jalaluddin Khilji in typically blood-soaked fashion grabbed power from Muizuddin. Muizuddin was sick. One of Jalaluddin's followers went and kicked him to death basically, and wrapped his body, and then his head was paraded and so on. So all kind of gruesome stuff. Now K.S. Lal places the birth date of Alauddin around 1266-67. So by 1300 he would have been roughly around 34-35 years of age. Now, due to his military capabilities, Jalaluddin appointed him the governor of the province of Kara in Uttar Pradesh, and he also gave him his daughter. So Jalaluddin Khilji was Alauddin's father-in-law as well. So Alauddin was also known as Ali for short. And from K.S. Lal's book, he seems to have been something of a henpecked husband. Now, when writing this book, Professor Lal was in a little bit of a secular mode, and the glowing forward of this book has been written by Muhammad Habib. Now, who was Muhammad Habib? So, Muhammad Habib was a prominent Islamist historian and father of the famous or infamous Irfan Habib. Um, so you would know the historians, Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib. So these are quite infamous. So there's also an interesting rumor that the Discovery of India book, which Jawaharlal Nehru supposedly wrote, was actually ghost written by Muhammad Habib. So it's possible. We don't know how much it is true or not. So having said all of this, while Professor K.S. Lal does try to attribute qualities that Ali or Alauddin did not possess, he does not attempt to hide acts of Islamic vandalism. So it's a very honest account, and obviously because he was in some kind of secular or Sarvadham Sabhav mode. So I'll just read a few extracts from the inner flap of the book. Okay. Okay, so the rule of the Khalji dynasty, 1290 to 1320, covers a short but fateful period of Indian history. During this period, practically the whole of India was gathered under the rule of Ala-ud-din Khilji, who ruled from 1296 to 1316. His valor in war was matched with his courage in the field of administration. His accomplishments in the spheres of art and culture were equally great. So I'm not sure what achievements he had in art and culture, and there are some quite funny chapters where Alauddin is portrayed as some kind of socialist ruler. He brings in all these uniform prices and everything and all of that. But KS Lal also says that those uniform prices kind of thing were to ensure cheap supplies for the army, so fixed below the market price. And the traders, who were the traders? The traders were 99% Hindus. Because even at this point of time, Muslims were mostly engaged in warfare and loot. Okay, so they were not in our architecture, they were not into business, trading, or anything like that. So any kind of trading they had, it was trade in Hindu slaves, so Hindu women who were sold, and even Hindu men and children who were sold into Central Asia. Okay, so and there is also a chapter on his married life and so on. So some of the chapters are quite funny, but the book overall is quite good. Definitely a landmark book. So if you want a one-stop resource to learn about Alauddin Khilji's campaigns and what he did and what he didn't do, then this is the book you definitely should read. It's published by Munshiram Manohar Lal, and I think you can find it on Amazon India as well. Right, so let's continue. Now, this map shows the three main campaigns which built up Alauddin's or Ali's finances, strength, and reputation as a military commander. Okay, so it was like, each campaign was like a turbo boost. So the money, wealth, and loot from each campaign would power the next one, and so on and so on. Now I will describe these in more detail in the following slides. So this entire presentation is really dedicated to these three key campaigns. Now the first looting raid was against Vidisha. So let's get the sorry, not the labor, the laser pointer on. Okay, so Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh, it's quite a historic place. It's well known for the Heliodorus pillar, which was erected by Heliodorus, who I think was the Greek ambassador. So this was in 1292. The next raid, now look at the dates. So the next raid was after a gap of 4 years, and this was against Devgiri, which was the capital of the Yadava Empire, and the ruler was Ramchandra Dev Yadava. So this is today's Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar or Aurangabad. So the name has been changed to Chhatrapati Sambhaji Nagar. I would have preferred it to have been renamed as Devgiri, which was the original name. But anyway, anything's better than Aurangabad. So the next and I think the biggest looting campaign was against the kingdom of Lata or Gujarat in 1299. So again, you can see a gap of roughly 3 years. This was ruled by the Waghela dynasty, and the last king of the Waghela dynasty was Karnadev Waghela. So 1299, so major raid on Gujarat. So it covered Anilwada Patan, which was the capital, then Khambat, Dhanduka, a lot of places, finally culminating in the destruction of the Somnath temple. Now, the key point to note is there's a gap of 3 or 4 years between each attack. Okay, so this is where we need to understand a little bit of military strategy and how warfare works. So the what this does reveal is that the military might was being scaled up for each attack. And even in today's age, for those who remember, the after the parliament attack in 2001, when India's parliament was attacked by, Pakistani terrorists, the government of India launched full mobilization, what was known as Operation Parakram. This took almost an year. Okay, I might be wrong there, but I think I remember correctly. And we are talking this in today's modern age, so-called modern age. Okay, and just imagine the situation, around 700 years back, when means of communication were quite rudimentary compared to today, and even the resources had to be. There was a very long logistic strain. So intelligence was being gathered on the target before the final attack was launched. Now it is perfectly possible that Alauddin carried out several probing attacks. So probing attacks against the borders of Devgiri or probing attacks against Vidisha before the main assault was launched, and especially against Gujarat before the large-scale assault was launched. Another point I always keep harping on is Islamic states are essentially parasitical states. So they are akin to a virus which invades the host's body and waits for a moment when the immune system goes down, and then it will get full blown. So you might get pneumonia, COVID, or something else. So even in today's age, if you take oil and natural resources out of the equation, you need to really think carefully which Islamic state in today's date is known for its innovation, creativity, etc. So Iran is an exception. Iran has always been an exception, and I'll come to that, sometime later. But for 99%, if you take the natural resources and the oil out of the equation, or in the case of Pakistan, it's regular, begging bowl handouts given by Western powers. None of them can survive on their own. So they always, uh, prey on more powerful states or weaker states and then extract their resources. They have done this throughout history. So there's nothing notable about architecture, arts, or anything. So all of this is just what do you say, gupshup in Hindi. Another point to note is Islamic sources. So all the Islamic historians rarely, if ever, record defeats. Okay, and battles sometimes which are decades apart. So one battle might happen today and another battle might happen after 30 years. But today's battle was a defeat, the one after 30 years was a decisive victory. So think about Pakistan. So Pakistan lost the 71 war very badly, got dismembered into two parts. Let's say in 2030, God forbid that Pakistan actually wins the battle. So at a later point, if 100 years down the line somebody writes the Islamic history, then they will probably write that Pakistan in one major assault captured India and defeated India and so on. And I met Pakistanis when I was in the UK who actually thought that they had won the 1971 war. So this is again the power of propaganda. So you have to be very careful when reading these biased sources. And the same rule applies in a slightly different way to the Christian British sources on Indian history. So you have to be again very careful when you are reading it. Sometimes you have to read between the lines. And there's another myth I would like to dispel at this point. It's a very prevalent myth in North India, so that the Muslims became exhausted fighting the Hindu kingdoms in the north, and thus the south was protected. So there was nothing like it. So the resistance of a few northern kingdoms did not halt the looters. Okay, at the most it delayed it by a few decades, but there were other factors: the Mongol invasions, and like I said, even the kingdoms of Gujarat and as far as Devgiri, which was across the Vindhya range, was also actively fighting them, sending armies up north. So even in the 1240s they were doing this. So this is one of the persistent myths. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So we'll explore each of these three: Vidisha, Devgiri, and the Gujarat campaign in a little bit more detail. So let's come to the Vidisha. So the attack was in 1292. Now Vidisha is a historic town, and as I have said before, it's quite well known for the Heliodorus pillar. And this photograph is of the Mala Devi temple, quite a historic temple, but they are all in very broken condition now. Okay, so the Heliodorus pillar was erected by Greek ambassador, but I won't discuss any dates because the entire dating of ancient India is a big problem in itself. So dates are mixed up, wrong dates have been assigned, so I won't discuss any dates. So let's take it that it was by a Greek ambassador sometime in the ancient past. Now in the 13th century, Vidisha was a very prosperous and rich trading city, which is why even today you will find very historic temples and their remains all around Vidisha. And it's around, I think, 30 to 40 kilometers from Bhopal. So it was no surprise that Ala-ud-din Khilji had his eyes on it, and the chaos and terror unleashed by Ala-ud-din Khilji is very aptly quoted by K.S. Lal in his book. So let me quickly get up the page. Just bear with me, I'm just looking for it. Let's have a look. So there's the Mongol invasion. Yep, the raid on Vidisha. Okay. His sudden appearance created consternation in the city. The frightened inhabitants concealed their idols in the bed of the Betwa. So Betwa is the river which flows next to Vidisha, to save them from pollution at the hands of the Muslims. But the prince had them hauled out of the river. After breaking a number of temples and capturing enormous booty, Alauddin proceeded to Delhi to pay his respects to the Sultan Jalaluddin. Alauddin carried with him a variety of articles of plunder together with a massive idol. So it's not clear what the idol was, but it seems to be a huge brass idol. So not sure what devata it is. So Sultan Jalaluddin ordered the captured idol, so the captured murti is the correct word, to be laid at the Badaun gate, to be trampled upon by the faithful, and rewarded Alauddin with the post of the Minister of War, Ariz-e-Mumalik. So this was the kind of situation in Vidisha, and Vidisha was very thoroughly looted. So almost razed to the ground is a more correct description. But see, it is a testament to the tenaciousness and the spirit of the Hindus that even though these towns, cities were demolished, they very quickly sprang up back again. So because Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism believes in life, whereas the desert and the Semitic religions are really barren. There is no life. It's all about destruction. Okay, so let's move on to Devgiri. Okay, so this is the fortress of Devgiri, what is known as Daulatabad. So the city of Aurangabad or Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar is next to it. And again, going back to the timeline, so Vidisha was in 1292, Devgiri was in 1296, 4 years. So we should not take that, Alauddin Khilji suddenly decided one day, okay, I will go to Devgiri, and he mounted his horse and, thousands of his cavalry followed him. It doesn't Things don't work that way. Mobilization takes time. There is definite intelligence. You have traitors or people who compromise the your enemy. So all of this is part of warfare. A lot of this is not written in these Islamic texts because they present a very simplistic narrative of you know a brave Muslim fighting against thousands of infidels and then winning and so on and so forth. So anyway, the first successful incursion into South India was via Devgiri. Okay, so Ala-ud-din Khilji laid siege to Devgiri in somewhere March April 1296. Now what happened in Devgiri was at this precise moment Ramchandra Raya's son Shankardev had taken his army and was fighting, I think, with the Hoyslas down south. So again, that is disputed. So it was not sure what was happening. So Ramchandra Rai was about to throw in the toil because Devgiri, the moat of the fort, the defenses were not properly maintained, and they were out of supply, so they couldn't stand the siege. But Shankardev arrived just in time. But there was again, Shankardev would have completely destroyed the Khilji army, but there was a rumor that the main Delhi army of 30,000-40,000 was coming. So there was widespread panic, and Shankardev's army kind of fled the battlefield. So Alauddin extracted a tremendous price from Ramchandra Deva, which included his daughter as well. So as per Farishta, now Farishta is prone to exaggeration. So Farishta was a Muslim historian. Um, I might be wrong here, so people can correct me in the comments. I think he was in the court of Ahmednagar, of the Ahmednagar Sultans, quite later on in 1500s. So according to him, the loot included 600 mands of gold, 7 mands of pearls, 2 man of other jewels, 1,000 man of silver, and a yearly tribute to the revenues of Achalpur province. So Achal is a town in Vidarbha in Maharashtra. It was a very key and strategic town in ancient times. So one mun or mond, as it is written in English, was around 15.75 kilos in Alauddin Khilji's time. So the gold tribute itself comes to 9,500 kilos, the silver to 15,000, 16,000 kilos roughly, and so on. Now, even if there is an exaggeration, which is quite possible, it is clear that a massive amount of wealth was looted by Alauddin from Devgiri. Now, just talking in terms of wealth, so Hindu kingdoms, if you think about Travancore and the Padmanabh Swami temple, so the royal family of Travancore, very dharmic family, they looked after the gold as custodians of Padmanabh Swami, of Lord Vishnu. So they never touched the gold; they simply kept piling it up in and sealed the chamber. So they never touched because it was Lord Vishnu's property, and that gold was valued at around, I don't know, 1 lakh something crores. So these were Hindu kingdoms which had not been invaded and subjected to these looting predatory raids any time in the past. So you can imagine that this is probably quite close to how much was looted. So backed by this treasure, Alauddin reached Delhi, murdered his uncle Jalaluddin in cold blood. And again, I think his head, Jalaluddin's head, was paraded on a spear throughout the city. So murderous wars of succession and assassinations have been an integral part of any Muslim sultanate anywhere in the world. So with this aid of this looted treasure, a massive standing army of around 4 lakh and 75,000 was maintained and the frontiers secured against the Mongol threat. So like I said, these are predatory kingdoms, or these are really bandit kingdoms. That's the correct way to look at things. So they will loot, they will sustain for some time. When the money runs out, they will run out again for some looting or extortion or blackmail. Okay, so Pakistan is a very good example. So let's look at the biggest campaign just before the year 1300 began, and this was the invasion of Gujarat. Okay, so this photograph is of Rani Ki Vav in Patan. Patan was the ancient capital of Gujarat. It was known as Anilwada Patan. Uh, there's another Patan which is Prabhas Patan, which is Somnath. So when I was a child, grew up in Gujarat, I used to always get confused because I used to think there's only one Patan. Later on, I realized that Somnath was the second Patan. So invasion of Gujarat in 1299 of the Common Era was made possible by the treachery of Madhava Mantri or Madhava Mehta, who was a minister in Karnadev Vaghila's court. So Karnadev Vaghila was the king of Gujarat. Now Karnadev Vaghila also seems to have been what you can call not a very dharmic kind of king. And Kavi Padmanabha, who has written a fantastic work called Kanha Dade Prabandha, which I will speak of, he has written that Madhav Mehta had an axe to grind with Karnadeva because he had killed Madhava's brother and abducted his sister-in-law. So what Madhava did was he went to Ala-ud-din's court. Now I'm guessing this would have happened at least a couple of years before 1299, before the actual attack. So probably 1296 or 1297. Okay. I'll just have a quick drink of water. Because like I said, things don't happen overnight. So it's not like Madhav Mantri is going to go to Alauddin's court today and say, Sultan, let's go to Gujarat. Karnadeva's wife Kamala Devi is very beautiful and there's a lot of money. And Alauddin Khilji mounts a horse and all of them run to Gujarat. Things don't work that way. So there would have been a lot of planning. Then they would have waited for a precise moment when the administration in Gujarat itself had become weak or internally divided or key commanders were away, and that's when the attack happened. So I'm guessing 1299 was when the all these factors came together and the perfect storm happened as far as Gujarat was concerned. So for the attack on Lata or Gujarat, so Alauddin didn't go personally. He deputed Ulugh Khan as his commander, and Ulugh Khan under a huge army marched towards Gujarat. Now to get to Lata, the Muslims had to pass through either Jalore or Chittorgarh. Okay, so they had to pass through these two regions. So there were only two routes to get to Gujarat. Now in Kanadade Prabandha, Kavi Padmanabha says very clearly that Raval Samarsimha of Chittorgarh gave passage to the army of the Turks. Now whether he gave passage on his own free will or he had no choice, we don't know. But Kavi Padmanabha clearly says that this should not have been allowed to happen because Jalore and Chittor both were asked by Ala-ud-din Khilji to give permission for his army to pass through and attack Gujarat. Now, the ruler of Jalore or Kanakachala or Suvarnagiri. So Suvarnagiri and Kanakachala were the original names of Jalore, and even the rulers of Jalore were Suvarnagiri Rajputs or Sonigara Chauhans. So Kanadade was the ruler in 1299 of Jalore, and which is why this ancient text is called the Kanadade Prabandha. So Prabandha means a composition. So a composition on the work of Kanadade by Kavi Padmanabha. So he was a great Dharmavir and he replied to the ambassadors of Ala-ud-din Khilji that this is contrary to our Dharma. The kings do not give passage when by doing so villages are devastated, people are enslaved, ears of women torn for ornaments, and cows and brahmanas are tortured. So very clear. And this Kanadade Prabandha is a fantastic work. I'll talk about it, in the last slide. So and Jai Ho to the Chauhan clan, which produced heroes such as Hamir Dev Chauhan and Kanadade Sonigara. So great clan, definitely. So it was apparent that Karnadeva was taken by surprise. And Kavi Padmanabha very clearly says that there was widespread panic in capital as it was attacked from all sides. So the first attack was, I think, at Modasa. And Batada, the Rajput chief of Modasa, who was under Karnadev, heroically resisted, but the army was simply too huge. I think at least a couple of lakhs. So Karnadeva fled, Anilwada Patan, which was the fort and the city. And in the chaos, his wife Kamala Devi was captured by Ulugh Khan's men, and she was sent to Delhi to Alauddin Khilji's harem. Now the temples in Anilwada Patan were razed to the ground, and quite a few were converted into makeshift mosques. Sorry, and the city was thoroughly looted. Lakhs of people were made slaves in the campaign of Gujarat, and Kavi Padmanabh says around 9 lakh people were enslaved and were being taken as slaves to Delhi. So 9 lakh Hindu women, men, and children. Okay. And it's not a very far cry because trade in Hindu women, children, men was big business right even up to the end of the Mughal Empire. So the scene in Gujarat has been described by Padmanabha as because they didn't stop at Patan, they went to other towns, Khambat and Somnath. So the ravaging and plundering Turkish troops were now roaming all over the country. They plundered grain, seized cattle of good breed, and made people prisoners. So it was complete chaos because the administration had collapsed, and obviously you had the Kshatriyas of individual places fighting, but they couldn't do much against the combined strength. So let's look at Somnath. So Prabhas Patan. So Prabhas Patan or Somnath. So this is a photo, I think around 1890 or something, or 1860. I don't remember. So there's the link of the Somnath temple as it was in its destroyed condition. Now, I believe that Ala-ud-din Khilji was the first one to destroy the Somnath temple. Even K.M. Munshi, who was a great scholar, and he had a big hand in the Hyderabad liberation of 1948, was very highly skeptical, whether Muhammad Ghazni had even ever reached Somnath in the first place, or whether it was just a myth invented by Muslim chroniclers. So Hindus need to be quite careful when reading these sources because some of the so-called victories never happened or they were just exaggerated. So I'll read a few passages from the attack on Somnath. So Ulugh Khan reached with his huge army around on sometime in 1299 to Somnath, and they surrounded. So you had the city of Somnath which had walls around it, and then you had the temple which was also fortified. Okay, so the first assault was on the city. Okay, so this is a description of how the Rajputs of Saurashtra faced it. So Vala, Vaja, Jethava, Chudasma. So these are the different clans of Rajputs. The Rauts of these clans unitedly faced the enemy, but the Sultan's army came like a raging tidal wave, overwhelming all that came in its way. Okay. So they were outnumbered, but they fought till the last. Okay. So Somanatha so this was the city, was now plundered thoroughly. Its gates and the ramparts were pulled down, and the Khan's horsemen subjected the town to pillaging reminiscent of the sack of Lanka. So complete loot. Meanwhile, the Rauts, so the Rajputs, circambulated round the temple. They took bath. Each one put tulsi leaves on his head and took charge of protecting the god's idols of Somnath. The chiefs in charge of the defense of Lord Somnath stayed on in the temple precinct. Mm. And this was so they fought till the end, but they were outnumbered, and obviously they all attained Virgati. And this is a description of what happened after there were no defenders left. The locks were broken open, and the enemy rushed through the doors and took possession of the temple drum and Kanshala. The Mlecha Asura stone breakers climbed up to the shikar of the temple and began to rain blows on the stone idols on all three sides by their hammers. They loosened every joint of the temple building and then began to break the different layers and the sculptured elephants and horses on them by incessant blows of their hammers. So the temple was completely destroyed, and you can see this because I believe after Alauddin Khilji's raid, the temple was rebuilt, and I think Muhammad Begada, who was the Sultan of Gujarat much later on, a few centuries down the line, he was responsible for destroying Somnath a second time. Okay. Now, this is again what they did to the people of Gujarat. They made people captive, Brahmanas and children and women, in fact, people of all 18 Varnas, huddled them and tied them by straps of rawhide, which is leather. The number of prisoners made by them was beyond counting. So, in a separate passage, Kavi Padmanabh says that they were around 9 lakh uh, prisoners. Okay, so let's have a look at Kanadade Prabandha, and I will speak on the ruler of Jalor later on. So definitely fantastic. So Kanadade Prabandha, this was translated by Professor V.S. Bhatnagar, who I think was at Jaipur University, and it's a fantastic translation because the quality of the translation says that it feels like you are reading a historical fiction novel. The quality of translation is so good. It doesn't feel like you are reading a dry text or something that's just been translated word to word. It just flows. So this has been published by Aditya Prakashan, which I believe is run by uh, Kailaswasi Sitaram Goel's son and with his descendants. So absolutely fantastic book. I do suggest you buy it. You will not regret buying it. It also shows the courage of our great Hindu rulers, and also courage of the common people and what the Muslims did. And it's a very even-handed text. because the Muslim texts usually, are abusing Hindus and, gloatingly talking of how lakhs were killed, slaughtered, and sent to hell, and all this kind of nonsense. But this is very even-handed, even its approach towards Muslim, rulers, the sufferings of Muslims, if, for example, sufferings of Muslim women, if their husbands died in battle, and so on. So very humane, and it's actually very fantastic work. So definitely do buy it. This is, I think, what should be in every Hindu's library rear on. So I'll cover, Kanha Dade in more detail for the attack on Jalore in the next part of the series. Okay, so that's it for this time. So we'll cover more in the second half, more on Ala-ud-din Khilji's misdeeds. So if you have liked this video, please remember to hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Thank you.